Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon and good evening. I'd like to welcome you to the GCP's special webinar launching the Equivalence Mechanism 2.0 to the Coffee Sustainability Reference Code. We have a wonderful program today, and we're very, very happy that you're here with us. Let's do a little housekeeping first. I'd like to remind everyone participating of the very important antitrust agreement and anti-competition laws that we're respecting throughout our meeting. And please be aware that by your participation in our webinar today, we are assuming that you agree to respect this important law. If you have questions throughout the webinar, we invite you to post them and your comments in the Q&A. We have a great program today. Our flow will be introducing agenda and speakers, and then we'll move to explore the Equivalence Mechanism 2.0, its evolution, purpose, and our special partnership between GCP and ITC. And then we'll have a wonderful conversation with the value chain in the sector to see how the EM is so important and so relevant to developing a wonderful global marketplace for sustainable coffee. And then we'll look at taking action together, our special next steps. We have wonderful speakers, experts from throughout the sector. Amy Russillo from Lyseed Consulting, Flavia Barbosa from Exportadora Grachupé, Helga Buitrago of the Global Coffee Platform, John Schluter from Cafe Africa, Marcelo Beriti from Nestlé, Matteo Lemol from the International Trade Center, and Olivier Laboule from Louis Dreyfus Company. And a special guest, Sonia Niederhörner, who is going to be capturing our conversation graphically. I'm Mary Pettit, Senior Advisor to the Global Coffee Platform. We're very, very happy that you're here with us today. I'd like to give you a few words about the GCP. GCP provides pre-competitive solutions for coffee growers, traders, roasters, and retailers to accelerate their sustainability development in a fast-moving marketplace. GCP's full suite of sustainability tools and resources, as well as exciting global initiatives focused on the industry's biggest challenges, set us apart as the only global association offering a shared sustainability platform as well as on-the-ground solutions for critical threats being faced now by coffee producers, families, and their communities. Our GCP 2.0 strategy is dedicated to transformational change for over 1 million coffee farmers in up to 10 countries, also helping close the living income gap and improving the prosperity, social conditions, and environmental protection for coffee farmers and families around the world. Well, how can we do that? One of the ways that we're doing it is by gathering today to explore how we advance towards sustainable sourcing. Some of GCP's most important tools, which have been developed by members and stakeholders over the past couple of years, are the Coffee Sustainability Reference Code, the Equivalence Mechanism 2.0, which we're launching today, and GCP Collective Reporting, also known as the GCP Roaster and Retailer Snapshot, where industry participants from around the world gather to show their increasing progress and celebrate how we are building a bigger, sustainable coffee global marketplace for everyone. We're also very excited that these tools can contribute to the accomplishment of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So grab your cup of sustainable coffee and let's dive into our program today, where we'll be examining the evolution, purpose, and partnership of EM 2.0 with ITC and with the sector to expand the global marketplace for sustainable coffee and help build a thriving, sustainable coffee future for all. It's my pleasure now to introduce our next speakers. I would like to introduce you to John Schluter from Cafe Africa, Helga Buitrago from the Global Coffee Platform, and Matteo Lemol from the International Trade Center. They're going to tell us about the evolution, purpose, and partnership with ITC that help make the Equivalence Mechanism 2.0 such an important building block for our sector. Before we dive into that, though, I would like to invite Flavia again to please let our Portuguese-speaking participants know about the translation opportunity we have for them today.
Só para lembrar vocês que a gente está tendo uma tradução simultânea para o português, então se vocês quiserem, na parte de baixo do Zoom, tem um globo que está escrito interpretação ou interpretation, é só clicar e clicar em português, e aí vocês conseguem ouvir o seminário em português. Obrigada.
Thank you, Flavia. And now let's proceed with our program.
Thank you very much, Mary. So can we move on to the next slide? Because the first question is, what is the equivalence mechanism? And as you probably will know, the Global Coffee Platform took over the coffee reference code, which was originally the 4C code and was then renamed the baseline coffee code. And in 2021, we did a revision. The technical committee did a revision of the baseline coffee code to bring it up to date with changes in the way that sustainable coffee was being produced and sourced. And in doing that, we gave it a new name, which was the Coffee Sustainability Reference Code. A nice, snappy title, you might not think, but at least it tells you what it actually is, which is quite helpful. So having made the update of the Coffee Sustainability Reference Code, we then had to deal with the equivalence mechanism. And the equivalence mechanism is a framework which was developed by GCP to assess whether sustainability schemes can be considered equivalent to the code of GCP. These sustainability schemes include a range of initiatives which can be public, private, or voluntary codes and standards. And we needed to revise the equivalence mechanism for two reasons. Firstly, the criteria of the sustainability code itself were slightly different in the new sustainability reference code that we produced. And secondly, the operational criteria also needed to be updated. So the sustainability reference code is part of the equivalence mechanism. And we also used the opportunity to revise and update the operational criteria as well, because the last revision of that was in 2020, which highlighted one or two areas which needed attention. What this gives us is a bit of a picture of the history of where we have come from on this. The launch of the Sustainable Coffee Sustainability Reference Code was done in October 2021. That was the revision. And we then started in November and December. We did the research, we drafted the beginnings of a revision, and then we made a stakeholder outreach and had a consultative process to talk to the sector and to meet with them. So we had a questionnaire which we put out, and we got a lot of feedback. I think we had 53 respondents to that. We had over 300 points and comments which were made, which gave a lot of work to the Secretariat and to Amy, our consultant. And this was all filtered through the technical committee with a task force. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a moment. The final draft was ready by May, finalized in June and approved by the board of the Global Coffee Platform in July this year. And we are now on the implementation in Q4 2022. So moving on from there, just to tell you a little bit more about the consultation process. The Global Coffee Platform has a technical committee. I'm the chairman of that, have been up to now. And the technical committee was primarily composed of producer representatives. We added to that a task force of people representing different sectors of the coffee market, further downstream in the market. And you can see the companies which were represented on the task force and technical committee. So we did the online survey. As I mentioned, we had a lot of feedback from that. And we also did beta testing with 7 schemes who self-assessed against the new criteria, both of the code and of the operational criteria. And we got a lot of useful feedback and had a lot of discussion with them as well. So it was a very consultative process. And I think there are some members of the technical committee and of the task force actually on this call. And I would just like to thank them for the tremendous amount of work which was done, which they did. And also Helga in the Secretariat and Amy, our consultant, because without their good work, it would not have been possible to do it. So thank you for that. And I'm going to pass on to Helga to take us on from there.
Thank you, John. And before giving you a flavor about the changes in the equivalence mechanism, I would like to share a couple of words about the evolution of the equivalence mechanism. So if we can go to the next slide. The first version of the equivalence mechanism took place in 2016. If you click, you will see that these were the schemes that were recognized, and they provided a first global reference for users of coffee sustainability schemes. Then, recognizing the changes that we had in the sector and to be able to capture and also embrace different approaches, then the equivalence mechanism evolved. And then in 2020, we issued a second version of it. And to be able to also reflect that while we recognize that these schemes are equivalent to the code, there are important differences between them, we then classify them according to their assurance model. So if you click again, you will see that we have them categorized according to whether they are third-party assurance or second-party assurance. And here you have the list of all the schemes that have been recognized as equivalent to the code. It's important to mention that this doesn't mean that they're equivalent to each other. Each of them has its own unique features, and that's not what the recognition says. So building on this work, then for the equivalence 2.0 revision, we had a set of principles that guided the revision and that you will see embedded in all the requirements that we're sharing with you today. So we had inclusiveness. We wanted to be able to embrace new approaches and innovations, transparency for stakeholders about what are the baseline practices and operational criteria, recognizing leadership standards, and in particular, ensuring that the value of certification was not diluted, level playing field for different approaches and innovations, and also recognizing that there are different starting points to achieve progress and impact. Continuous improvement, as we know that sustainability is a journey and that what's important is that continue improving the practices, and ensuring credibility about the claims, but also about the schemes that we have recognized. So if we go to the next slide, you will see that for a scheme that wants to be recognized as equivalent to the code, they will have to meet the sustainability criteria. John already mentioned about this. These are basically the principles and practices in the Coffee Sustainability Reference Code that is a common language about baseline practices of sustainability. This is the what. And then we also assess if the schemes also meet operational criteria. This is the how, is how the governance is made, how the standards were developed, what data is required, what's the assurance model behind, where claims are possible. So all this is what we call system criteria. And this was the focus of this revision that we are sharing with you today. In the next slide, you will see what are the main changes that we have introduced in this version. In particular, we have a new section on governance, and we have a new section on standard setting. Also, across all the operational criteria, we have improved the language. We have streamlined all the requirements. We have added guidance. We have added examples and rationale. This was also the beta testing that John mentioned was really important because it helped us to understand where were the gaps in terms of understanding. And we hope that this version you're going to see is going to be much more accessible and is going to enable consistent interpretation. A last point is that we have now added different elements that the schemes have to be made public about the governance, about the standards, about the assurance, about the data. We also hope that this step forward in improved transparency from all the schemes is going to also support the credibility of the different schemes and also of the equivalence mechanism themselves. So now that we have this set of criteria and that we have finalized the review, it's time for the implementation. And we're really excited that we're going to be working with the United Nations International Trade Center. If we can please go to the next slide. We have chosen ITC to work on the implementation of the Equivalence Mechanism 2.0 because they have a long history of working with other public and private benchmarking exercises. You see some examples on the slide. They also have experience with other sectors that have developed tools that are very similar to us. And overall, we feel that this partnership with ITC is going to increase the neutrality and the credibility of the equivalence mechanism, and at the same time is going to enable us to bring this work to scale. And before we hear from Matthew about ITC, I would like to share which are the steps that a scheme has to follow if they wish to go through the equivalence process. So in the next slide, you see that this process has three phases. It has the application, it has the assessment, and it has the reporting. The application is managed by GCP. Basically, we make here a point in terms of checking the eligibility criteria. We're going to be prioritizing the members of GCP, and then comes the part of ITC. So ITC is going to check if the scheme meets the coffee sustainability reference code and the operational criteria. After back and forth with the schemes, they're going to issue a recommendation. That recommendation is yes, they can be considered equivalent or not, and then GCP makes a final decision. If it is then positive, if we consider also that the scheme meets the equivalence mechanism 2.0, then this scheme is eligible for the report that we have on sustainable coffee purchases and that we issue every year. Then the last step is the reporting. So once the scheme has been recognized as equivalent, once a year, they need to share with us a couple of metrics and also information about changes in their scheme. So this is in a nutshell, basically the process and where we are. And now to talk about the implementation, Matthew, if we go to the next slide, thank you, the previous one, yes. I would like to give you the floor so you can share also from your perspective why this partnership is important for ITC and what it is about.
Well, thank you so much, Gelka. Thank you, John. It's a pleasure to be with you today, and indeed, very happy that ITC is joining forces with the GCP on this fantastic new milestone of the equivalence mechanism. So I can only reiterate what you said, that we are at the ITC extremely happy to leverage our experience, and in particular, the Standards Map global database to facilitate the assessment of the sustainability schemes that wish to be recognized under the revised equivalence mechanism of the GCP. So as a United Nations agency, we really want to play the role of a neutral broker of information on sustainability schemes. We're not there to judge or value or put a certain ranking. We are just there to make sure the information is being managed properly. We do have indeed a decade of experience of successful partnerships with sustainability standards and to promote also best practices on sustainability. And we do that through enhanced transparency and comparability, as well as putting together a common language on sustainable trade. Coffee is obviously a very important sector to us as well. And we've leveraged, let's say, the Standards Map database already in different types of partnerships. Now, this one partnership with the GCP builds very nicely on our mission, because we want to support sustainable trade practices and to ensure the integrity of the whole recognition process. So again, very happy to be here with you to leverage the Standards Map perspective and to operate as a neutral broker of the information for the assessment of the recognition schemes.
Thank you, Matthew. You mentioned transparency in your introduction, and that's a topic that was very recurrent in the process of developing this equivalence mechanism. You have worked with many standards and benchmarking exercises. So what role has played transparency for the credibility of the schemes that you have worked with?
Thanks for the question, Helka. Transparency is also a bit of a scary word. I mean, to which extent do you need to be fully transparent on absolutely everything? And again, here I want to reassure, transparency is very much seen in a way of building trust, building interoperability and common linkages between business partners, scheme owners, recognition mechanisms, and so on and so forth. So when you were mentioning about the performance criteria, the operational criteria, it almost sounds a little bit complicated. And I want to reassure every scheme owner that would like to participate and apply for the recognition process, that our role will be to make that as simple as possible in a transparent way where you understand what would be the requirements, so that it builds the necessary trust to share information and to contribute as efficiently as possible to this common good and objective of the GCP. So transparency in that sense is really a trust builder component of all these relationships that you are putting together. And we are happy to contribute on this.
Thank you, Matthew. I think we're going to perhaps hear more about this in the next part of the program. Now, I would like to give the floor to Amy Russillo, who was the consultant who supported us magically through this process to bring us to the next part of the program. Amy, over to you.
Thanks, Helga. And yeah, transparency and trust is an excellent segue because it is bringing transparency. The equivalency mechanism is bringing transparency to users of different schemes as well, and that's building trust, and that's incredibly important, particularly as we see with emerging legislation around claims, et cetera. So, and people concerned about greenwashing. So this is the equivalency mechanism brings that type of transparency and trust. But I want you all to hear from this powerhouse. I would say this group needs no introduction. It's quite an honor to be just facilitating this session on with this group. They're all leaders in coffee. They're all leaders in sustainability. What I would like, I have a couple questions for them. Before you answer the question, if you could give a quick introduction of yourself to the group and highlight any recent news that you want to, because you're doing a lot of exciting work and I really appreciate that. So I'm going to start with Flavia, if you don't mind. First of all, one of the top 100 powerful women in agriculture on Forbes magazine, and a multi-generational company based there in Brazil. And so I'd really like to ask you a little bit about how can you bring everyone along this journey? I mean, you are a leader, but we really need to make sure we're bringing everyone along. So maybe if you can talk a little bit about what you all are doing.
Good morning, everyone, Brazil, and good afternoon for the rest of the world, I guess. So it's a pleasure to be here. So as Amy said, my name is Flavia. I'm a director here at Exportadora Guaxupé. We are a family-owned and a Brazilian trade house. So it's also very important to participate with all these speakers. We have been on the sustainability journey for a very long time. And since 2 years, we launched our own scheme that it's called Guaxupé Planet. And our goal when we listened to what GCP was doing with the equivalence mechanism was that what we were doing if we were on the right path. And I think this helped us a lot to put things on paper that were very obvious to us, perhaps because we are in Brazil and we know our rules, our legislation and the way we do things, but it's not so obvious for the other persons that are around the globe. So for our clients, our roasters that are in Europe, US, or Asia, that they don't know what we do or we have to do in our legislation. So just to share you an example is that like invoicing here in Brazil, we don't buy any coffee without an invoice. So this was very obvious to us, but Amy and GCP help us to put that on paper and to really describe our process. So this also helps us to include more people in our scheme so we can have more credibility to sell it to people to understand what we are doing and of course to grow it along the way. So this is really, really important. It was really important for us to help us to give this, to put our ideas on paper and to organize and see what the world needed and wanted to know, because sometimes we didn't really know what it was really important.
Really highlights that common language. So you were able to communicate. So you're based in Brazil, which is very unique in the among the other schemes that are involved. You're based in one country. So that's very exciting. So you're providing transparency and trust in your system. So you know what you're doing, but you can actually have a way to commonly communicate that. I'd like to turn to Olivia. I think he's calling in from the space station is what I heard. And you know, the work that you're doing at Luistra, you know, he's global head of the Sustainable Responsible Sourcing Program. And I was very interested to read your blog around your trip to Mexico, about how coffee can keep you awake, not necessarily the caffeine, but the business of being in coffee. So, you know, how does the equivalency mechanism make your job easier? What's the value of it for you?
Yes, thank you very much, Amy. So LDC, as a member of the GCP, is very supportive of the equivalence mechanism. And we've participated with our own LDC responsible sourcing program in the beta testing of it. And how it makes my work and that of my colleague Nicolas, who is in charge of responsible sourcing here for us at LDC, is that it helps us not having to go through an assessment by 10, 15 different clients for our own program. We can just go through one auditing or verification process and be accepted then with this program by different clients. I think it's obvious that the same applies to, and I'm sure we'll hear from Marcello on his perspective, but the same applies on the other side from the roaster's perspective. And so collectively, thanks to GCP, we basically do something which is at the core of the mandate, which is to work pre-competitively to avoid us repeating, reinventing the wheel and spending all our efforts on verification rather than on doing the actual work that will lead to impact for the coffee farmers and for the value chain. One thing that I'd like to highlight as well is in terms of integration, I think there is something between some sort of conventional coffee that doesn't mean is unsustainable, but conventional coffee and Rainforest Alliance coffee. We know how difficult the latter is to achieve, and we know very well that not all the farmers in our value chains will be able to meet this standard, not next year, not in 2 years, not in 3 years from now. So the GCP equivalence and those in-house RS programs, certainly ours, is a way of picking up farmers where they are, organizing them if they don't have the ability to do that themselves, and bringing them on a path of continuous improvement so that one day they can graduate towards that, but also they retain market access. We know the EU is currently implementing a lot of regulations, and we see it as our responsibility to be sure that as many farmers as possible can continue getting market access. And so finally, this is also creating a level playing field for us, because otherwise we would basically probably see a race to the bottom. Everybody would try to undercut each other in our, in our sector probably. And here we know that we have at least a level playing field. We know what the rules of the games are. We all meet that, and then we can compete on impact and on delivering the value. So this is how it helps us, and we're very grateful to be part of the conversation today and part of the beta testing.
Great, thanks. We're seeing a lot of good common threads here from, that transparency, creating that common language, so that building that trust, as well as then, raising the bar and bringing everyone along on the sustainability journey, that inclusiveness. So really appreciate that. So last but not least, I'm going to turn to Marcello here, the head of green coffee development there. And you have 100% responsible sourcing commitment by 2025. Now I realize you're really well on your way to that, but how can you achieve that with so many different programs? So I wanted to hear from you, from your perspective, a little bit of how the equivalence mechanism can also bring value.
All right. No, thank you very much, Amy, and good afternoon to everybody. So yes, my name is Marcel, the coffee development side, and about a month ago, the Nescafé Plan 2030, with an ambition to work with a much more integrated strategy to use regenerative agriculture to achieve carbon reductions, smallholder producer income increase, and better social conditions. The responsible sourcing part is an integral part of this puzzle element for achieving all these elements. We are at a little bit over 80% at the moment, and we want to close the gap as quickly as possible towards 100%, not beyond 2025. So the benefit that we see from the equivalence mechanism, together, of course, with the reference code and the roaster retailer reporting, is that we have a reinforcement of the evaluation of the programs, and are able to actually put together different data, different elements of the different programs with comparability. The other point that is very important is the harmonization of the program's content and approaches. Each program is different. We're not saying that every program need to be exactly the same, but there is a minimum criteria, minimum level of deliverables that the programs need to have in terms of content standards, but also in terms of approaches and management of the programs, which are very important. And the final point here, it is about enhancing the credibility of the programs. We have already heard from Olivier about upcoming regulations and all this, and we need. I consider that coffee is at a very not let's be humble, not very advanced, but much more advanced level than other agricultural raw materials in terms of the tools, capabilities, structures, and we need to have the existing tools, the existing capabilities as a demonstrable risk mitigation for deforestation, for labor rights violations, for all these very important topics that are coming up from a regulatory perspective. And one extra word that I would like to say as well is that everything that I described is about how the world exists today. But sustainability, regulations, requirements, consumer demand, consumer ambitions, it all keeps evolving. So the equivalence mechanism and the coffee reference code also can be used as a tool to coordinate sort of an orderly evolution of the sector as well, so that you would be able to guide, to shepherd the evolution of sustainability schemes, of tools according to the overall environment, and which will continue to evolve in terms of expectations, availability of technologies, and all this. So very happy to be here, and honored to be in this panel.
Thank you, Marcelo. And I want to see if there's any questions from the audience. I was trying to monitor it, but I didn't see anything specific for any of the panelists. But Flavia, I want to let you maybe have our final word. We need to wrap up, but we heard a lot of the common threads. From leaders in the sector, from leaders in sustainability, very inspiring how the equivalency mechanism is adding value. So maybe Flavia, maybe you can wrap us up with any final words from your perspective.
Just like to call, I think, other local companies to join, I think, the equivalence mechanism. I think this helps a lot the process, and to say that it is possible. I think sometimes we are a little afraid of participating, of a lot of work and a lot of things that need to be done, but it is possible to do it. And so we can participate more within the market and bring also our local ideas, our local demands from each country. So I think this is also helps the mechanism, helps GCP, helps other participants to have an overall view. So I think this is, we can really do it.
Thank you. That's our global, so local and the global. Thank you very much. Helga, I'm going to turn it back to you. And I really want to thank the panelists. It was just, I'd like to spend the whole time with them, but I know we only have this amount of time slated, but I really would like to thank them for their words of wisdom and inspiration for the rest of us.
Thank you, Amy. So now that we have heard about the benefits of the equivalence mechanism, one of the questions in the chat is about when can we start this process? When can the applications be submitted? So basically as of now, but we assume that the schemes will need some time to have a look at the version, the revised version, and align their systems with it, in particular the operation criteria. So it's as of now open. You will find on our website an application box. Then we're not going to be announcing all the schemes one by one as they become approved, but actually we're going to make 2 rounds. One in February, March, connected to the GCP collective reporting on sustainable coffee purchases, and then another one around September and October. I think it's important to mention that all the schemes that have been recognized until today as equivalent will need to go through this process and will have until 1 year as of now to actually align their systems, submit, go through the process and have an outcome. After that, then if they have not gone through this, they will be delisted from our website. So with that, then I would like to share what resources do we have. So I think as of now in our website, you will find that we will have the equivalence mechanism in English and in Vietnamese. The Portuguese, the Spanish, and the Bahasa versions are going to be uploaded in the next couple of days. We also have the contact form, so you get in contact with us so we can give you the information that, that you will require to submit. Then we have a glossary and we have annexes, and then we have a couple of supporting documents, the summary of the consultation, so you hear what the voices we heard and how we consider them in the final version, the main changes document, and then a set of frequently asked questions with an emphasis on implementation that I know is a topic that many schemes are interested in understanding how it's going to work out. And with that, then I would like to give back the floor to Mary.
Thank you, Helga. Thank you very much, panelists and all participants today in the webinar for so thoroughly and deeply and openly exploring this important building block to help all of us expand the global marketplace for sustainable coffee in the most efficient way possible. We would like to really encourage everyone to take action together, and GCP is an association that exists to empower that action. We would like to take a special moment to thank our members who are working together collectively to deliver impact, believing that achieving coffee sustainability is a shared responsibility. And we're working together. We're building business solutions to advance coffee sustainability. How do we do this? We're combining strengths. We're working together, and we're especially sharing best practices and new discoveries, having hard conversations to figure out and understand and work together with the entire sector to develop building block solutions like the Coffee Sustainability Reference Code, the Equivalence Mechanism 2.0, and collective reporting through the GCP snapshot, where roasters and retailers throughout the sector come together to show and celebrate their continually advancing purchases of sustainable coffee. We know we can't get to the thriving, sustainable coffee world that we all wish to have if we don't build a thriving, sustainable coffee marketplace. And that is indeed what our members are dedicated to achieve. We would like to let all of our GCP members on this call know that we've got a great annual member assembly coming up. That will be December 7th and 8th in the morning, virtual, well, actually my morning, sorry, virtual participation. And our theme this year is aligning for impact. We have a lot of new programs and strategies that have evolved to achieve our GCP goals. And we're going to do a deep dive into those, and we'll have reports by the Secretariat to members on Secretariat activities. And we'll also have reports from members to members celebrating achievement and suggesting additional ways to increase our impact and accelerate our progress. And that will be the GCP member assembly. If you're not a member of GCP, we invite you to become a member of GCP. So please contact me, Mary Pettit. I'm Pettit at globalcoffeeplatform.org, or my colleague in Europe, Caroline Glavka at Glauca at globalcoffeeplatform.org, and we would be delighted to discuss membership with you and tell you much more about our organization. Let's see what Sonia has captured during this very interesting, deep, detailed, and provocative conversation. Sonia, can we see what's going on? Can you tell us a bit about it, please?
Okay, so it's very bare bones. I'll still add some more color, but here we have some of the introduction. So here we've got the equivalence mechanism showing that it's really about schemes recognized by GCP as equivalent to the Coffee Sustainability Reference Code. So here we've got the reference code, and then below that, the collective GCP reporting. So that's in combination and leading up to these larger goals of the GCP goals and the SDGs. And then here, this is just some of the essence I've captured from the relevance of the equivalence mechanisms around inclusivity. It's bringing everyone along, harmonization between programs, increased program credibility. We've got reduced verification processes, the level playing field. People can now compete on impact rather than on cost. Around transparency, the mechanism allows interoperability and common language. Around improvement, it is allowing a coordination of the whole sector to slowly improve. And then here I've just got a quote, which is really just encouraging everyone to join in, that it's doable and bring your local ideas, and then kind of just still busy capturing a few of the resources. So very much work in progress.
Sonia, that's an impressive capture of what has been a very detailed discussion about this important building block. And we also want to take a look at this page and see how much foundational strength is captured. And we want to invite all partners who have sustainability schemes to please apply for EM 2.0 equivalence, to have your schemes recognized and made equivalent to the Coffee Sustainability Reference Code, our shared language and that tool that we're all using to become more effective and efficient as we develop a more vibrant sector with a clear, transparent, shared business approach to expanding the entire global marketplace, because that's what we need to do together. And that's what we're dedicated to doing in GCP. And this, of course, includes our collective action initiatives at Origin, which are addressing pressing challenges in an efficient way and creating impact. There's a lot of good things going on here, and we invite everyone to join us and make it happen together. I want to thank all of our speakers and everyone who has contributed to creating this outstanding building block to empower the business of sustainability and also to increase prosperity and economic advantage and environmental protection and social development for coffee farmers and their families and their communities upon whom we rely. We're creating this thriving, sustainable world together. And thank you so much, everyone, for being with us today.